Well, hopefully everybody's back. Again, I appreciate everybody joining. So we do have a exciting meeting today. So we're really going to be building off of what we talked about a lot last week, last month, and many of you were there. Before I go too far, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? I think they've been distributed, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to read them.
So moved.
Second.
It was a little short. Yeah, it was a little tough. Okay, great. Okay, we got that. We're good to go. All right, excellent. Okay, so so let me back up a little bit. So we're going to build off of what we kicked off last month, which was the discussion around this. Oh, well, it's supposed to. I have it written. See, yours, Chris, is in the right order. Is y'all's run backwards like mine? It's really odd. Anyway, so we kicked off our discussion about that. The book had a good discussion. We talked about some of the elements that we thought were the good selling points, or really kind of the unique elements, the differentiate factors about the school. And we're really going to build on that. And so Jill's going to kind of finish up and kind of get into the meat of the training. And I think we're going to be breaking off into rooms so we can kind of practice, have some feedback, and so we can really understand how we're going to go about actually executing this over the course of the next month. It is going to be a kind of a full agenda, and so I know that we like to talk about things like enrollment, and we like to talk about things like, hey, what are we going to do with from back to school procedures. But we're going to avoid talking about those today. So again, so we can focus on the training at hand. I think that there's going to be some communication to back to school protocol. Sam Vanderplas has sent out, and I think there might be additional information soon. And I think Missy, you'll probably be sending out just information on enrollment, an update from where we've been last month. So pretty good with that, guys. Any questions?
Is it only freezing up on me?
So the training, the asking, is it freezing up?
Is it freezing up on everybody, or is it just mine?
Mark does keep freezing up a little.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you guys are good. So let me turn it over then to Missy and Jill here, and you guys can talk. How about that?
And I'm just going to hand it off to Jill. She is doing the training, and I'm sure she's going to do a great job with us.
Jill, you are muted currently, by the way.
Okay, here we go. All right, so everybody can see my slides, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hold on, I have so many screens in front of me, it's a little crazy. Okay. So the last meeting, and stop me, just wave if you can't hear me at any given point in time. Okay, so our last meeting, this is my last, here we go. Okay, so the last meeting we talked about, we had a focused conversation, we talked about areas of confidence and anxiety, we discussed our values, and as a group we determined what changes we wanted to make. I think we had a long history of being idea makers, but maybe less history of taking action. So that was what we talked about as a group. And then we committed to the action. So reviewing donor lists, preparing talking points, making introductions and starting conversations and relationship building, all based on what we learned from Jerold Panas's book on asking, which is my favorite book ever. So any questions about that? No, okay. So I'll go to the next slide. So we're fairly familiar with the development activities. We've talked about the events quite a bit, the North Texas Giving Day, the Gala, Boosterthon, and a new focus for our committee is major gifts. We've also talked about the campaign for the playground as well. And I just wanted to have that in there so people understand that's part of development, but it's not what we're focusing on. We're going to be focusing on the major gifts. So the development goals, the 200,000, that's going to be what we focus on, working in concert with Missy and Mr. Vanderplas and the school development team to raise that amount of money. We've talked quite a bit about the designations of the tuition assistants, the teacher training and resources for that 200,000, and what may come up with COVID and as a school having to make some changes, and we have some increased technology needs in some areas, some safety, needs as well. Donors may say, hey, you know what, I can get you 500 Chromebooks, whatever that is. That's a donor-led comment, and I would say that's where we need to check with administration to find out if that's a good fit or not. But thank you so much for your generosity, so that we're not going out and talking about those needs, but no, the donor may come back with those needs. Sometimes they're perfect and you talk to Missy, Mr. Vanderplas, and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you so much. And other times they may say that might not be a very good fit for us right now. These are our true needs, but we don't want to tell that donor absolutely not. If they understand that maybe tuition assistance is ahead of whatever that other thing is, that's okay too. Donors understand that. That's the whole point, is they want to invest in the organization. So how do we feel about asking for money? Oh, look at the cute babies. So just a point of self-reflection. We don't even need to do out loud sharing. Just think about how you feel about soliciting money. I find it exciting and fun. Maybe other people don't. Oh, Michael Holleran likes it. Perfect. All right. So next, how do you feel when you make a gift to your favorite charity? You're like the cute clapping baby, aren't you? So that's what we need to think about and focus on. Those are the feelings to focus on when you ask for money. So donors experiencing the joy and the pride, being part of something meaningful, that's the whole point of philanthropy. And so if you focus on your fear, and I did this early when I was a development officer, I focused on my fear and I made it about me, and I was sweating and stuttering, and it wasn't good. It wasn't pretty. Thankfully, donors are fairly generous people, and they say, it's okay, Jill, calm down. Here's $1,000, whatever that is. So really focusing on the donor and about their feelings is going to take that fear away from you when you sit in front of a donor. So thinking about major gifts, so fundraising is all about communication. A failure in fundraising is absolutely a failure in communication. So you need clear messaging, you need to be able to articulate the need, and then also be a really good listener. Part of communication is that active listening. So what is the donor signaling? What do they care about? What are their values? If they say, I just don't want my kids in public school, okay, we learned a little bit more about that donor, and we can focus a little, we know what to focus a little bit more on in that conversation. So aligning the values, what do they really care about? And we talked about values in our last conversation, and the reason I did that is so I wanted you to think about your values, but also hear your peers' values, what they care most about, and that you can come into that conversation aligning those values. So the relationship building is obviously key. What's the genuine conversation? And you're drawing the donor closer to the organization. Obviously, people give to people, but people give to the people at SEAS, which are the children, the administration, the teachers. And think of it as you're inviting their investment. If you really want to get me on a soapbox, use the language hitting people up or digging in people's pockets. Use that language and I'll get on my soapbox, because if you think about it that way, you're not going to be successful in fundraising. You're thinking about them investing in the values that we already know and love. That's why we're part of SEAS. That's why our children are there. And that's the same reason that that we're going to be sitting across the table from these people, or sitting across the computer screen from these people. The other point that I really want to make is peer-to-peer solicitation is the most successful solicitation. So you as a parent, you as a parishioner, you as a Catholic, we will be approaching our peers for asking. And in doing so, we get to give a testimonial about why we care about SEAS. We get to talk about the why now. we have kids there, or we're members of the parish, or we had kids there. We can talk the talk and walk the walk. We've got great stories because we've lived it and breathed it. So getting into the appointment. So we talked a little bit about this last time, about the way Jerry, Jerry has in the appendix different language. He talked about sending a letter. Some people may be responsive to a letter. I typically will pick up the phone and leave a message or have a conversation with someone, and then I will follow up with an email. Either way, I always follow up with an email because I want that potential donor to have my email address. I want them to have my cell phone number, my work number. And then in that email, I can also say, these are the 3 potential upcoming appointment times that Missy and I can sit down with you, or that Mr. Vanderplas and Missy are available, or maybe they want to meet with a teacher. Maybe then we have to ask the teacher, is that something that you and Missy and I can come and talk to you? So, I've been involved with St. Elizabeth and Seton since we moved here in 2017. Whatever program is most important to me. So like tuition assistance, I care so much about that, and this is why. And then I summarized the values that we talked about. So formation in Catholic faith, academic excellence, positive peer influences. These are just 3 key ones that you can keep in your back pocket all the time. I like to have the picture of the church and the teaching and the friends, because that can just come to your mind immediately when you're talking to a donor. And then you can let them expound on whichever one they talk about first is going to be what they care most about. If they're like, exactly, there aren't enough practicing Catholics today. Perfect. Now I know what to really hone in on when I talk to them and I ask them for money, because they just signaled to me what they care most about. If they say, oh my gosh, yes, I can't even believe the number of Catholic students that go on to college. Exactly. Do you know over 80% of them go on to college, and in public school, only 40% go on to college? That's an enormous difference. And that's why we invest in a Seeds education. Those are the things to have in your back pocket. You can have as much more information, or you can just have what's on this screen, and you can ask the donor more questions about why they care so much about that. All right, so I don't want to do all the talking, but I do want to get through my slides.
What do you do normally when maybe you don't relate to their point in a way? If
Sure. I usually ask them to tell me more about it. If it's something I've never heard of before, or it's not what I expected out of them, I say, oh, you know what? I'm a really curious person, and people accuse me of asking too many questions, and it kind of gets me in trouble. But it also is a way for me to learn more about the donor and what they care about. And if it's something crazy and off the wall, I'll be like, wow, I've never even heard of that before. How does that relate to what you've seen at Seas? Or how does that relate to, Father Flynn coming in? Whatever it is that they signaled, they'll tell you more about that. But certainly donors surprise me all the time with things they talk about that I don't have a clue about. And sometimes I say, I'm going to write that down and look that up, because that sounds really fascinating and I've never heard of that before. So, all right, our talking points. So starting with openings. Everybody can make small talk. That's really all this is. You're just putting everybody at ease. How are you? Tell me more about this. A lot of warmth and sincerity. Then we get on to the questioning. How do you feel about Seas? What do you like most about it? Tell me about your time there. Just get them talking, because you're going to see what they're most excited about. When you feel like you're at a point where, and this is a give and take, this isn't just you peppering them with questions, this is a give and take, I can say, oh my gosh, what I hear you saying is the reason that you've sent all 4 of your kids to Seas is that you believe that it was worth investing in financially in their academic education at a young age, because you really want them to go to a great college. So all I did was just parrot back what I heard. And then that's where I can move into the presentation of why, oops, sorry, I keep doing that, what we're asking for. Yes, Michael.
Jill, I think this is great. A lot of these questions I'm looking at here, they seem to probably work really well if we're approaching, say, like an alumni family or something along those lines. Can you give an example of how you might tweak that language if you were talking to just a parishioner who has had no specific ties to the school outside of the fact that they're a parishioner here at our parish?
Sure. Well, knowing that our school is a program of our parish you can ask more about what they love about the parish of Seas, and then you can move it into the conversation of the school. So maybe you give them a few more facts, like, did you know we have 485 students enrolled? I just made that number up, by the way. Do you know that we have 485 students enrolled? You know, this percentage, and this is some information. If you want to build your talking points this way, Missy would be able to give you this, the facts of, did you know that this many students go on to Catholic high school? And this many of those students that we've been able to track go on to college. And so some of that you're informing as you're engaging. If they really don't want to talk about the school, then maybe an ask for tuition assistance is or isn't good. But I think what you can do, if we go back, I think you could focus on this faith formation. If you say, our Catholic students go on to practice Catholicism as adults, and they go on to, then teach their children Catholicism and bring their children to church. And we found that that's the best way to form practicing Catholics as adults. That may be just enough that they need to hear to say, oh, I've never thought about the school that way. I always thought about it as, just another school, or whatever they're going to say. But think of a way to create that inroad so that if they don't know a lot about the school, you can educate them a little bit more, but then you're bringing it back to what they care most about. If they're honestly not, if they're like, I'm not giving money to the school, then you can say, who else do you know? And I'll get to this, but who else do you know what do you think would really be interested in making an investment in the Catholic school? Okay, so this is the
Jill, I would actually argue you should ask for that referral, even if whether they are or not open to giving to the school, because if they are, they'll gladly give that referral as well.
Right. So, and sometimes I've had great luck with referrals, and sometimes people get turned off by asking for other people. It really depends on the person. But obviously I'm not a shy person. I just apologize if I offend them. So, okay. So let's see, we were at the presentation. Okay, so the presentation parts that we talked about, what I hear you saying is you've sent all your 4 kids to Seas because you wanted them to go on to have an amazing academic experience, and now they're all in graduate school, medical school, law school, dental school, whatever that looks like. So then say, the reason I wanted to talk to you today is that our need for tuition assistance has really, really increased at Seas, and we want to make sure that we have as many students there as possible. We want to have a diverse student body. We want to make sure that every Catholic in the community can have a Catholic school experience. Whatever language works for you. I don't want to tell you exactly what to say because I want you to put it in your own words, but the presentation should be about why you wanted them to come there, what that ask is, and that testimonial. My husband and I made a financial commitment to send our children to school despite job losses, despite whatever. We put enough money in savings that we knew that our children would remain at Seas as long as they possibly could. And this is the growth we've seen in our sons, and this is why. And at this point, you're going to be able to tell, and we should even be able to tell before we're in this meeting, but you typically can determine if you're going to be able to solicit during this appointment or not. If it's a parent at school, they know Missy raises money, they know you're on the committee, they know you're going to ask them for money. It's not going to be a surprise. So you can move into the ask. If it's someone a little bit newer, maybe their children went to Seas, but they're not a current parent anymore and we don't know them that well, but let's say I know them through work, but I don't know them through Seas, and so I'm trying to bring them back as a potential donor to Seas, that first meeting may not be appropriate. And at that point, Missy and I would have already had that conversation to say, you know what, I don't think Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they're really gonna be ready for a solicitation. We're gonna be prepared just in case to ask them for, a $5,000 gift to the tuition assistance fund. But, you and I can kind of signal to each other, or one of us can say, hey, you know what, can we meet with you again in 2 weeks so we can get back to you with any of your questions and ask for your investment. They may say, we're ready today. What are you looking for? Otherwise, they may say, yep, that would be great. And I'd say, okay, we'll check back with you next week to finalize our appointment in 2 weeks, and then we'll move on. So any questions so far about this? No, okay. Oops. Wrong screen. Okay, if the ask is appropriate, this is where you would say, would you consider a gift of $5,000? Make sure you ask for a dollar amount, and then you stop talking.
That's in the book.
See, Jerry's so smart. I just steal his information. So if they're like, wow, that's a lot of money. Yes, it is. And that's why we're here today.
Just remember, the person that talks last loses.
Michael knows the game. Good job. So if they have objections, which we'll talk about in a minute, you can talk through them, but then reinforce, the reason we're sitting down with you is because you sent 4 children to C's. Obviously, it was a huge commitment for you. And now you can see more than ever for us to be able to keep children in a Catholic school during this pandemic when people are losing jobs. We need to be able to raise money for our tuition assistance fund. We want to keep the families that have made the investment but now have to leave. We want to make sure that they have their child is able to stay in C's and have that full experience, whatever that looks like. The notes down here I talked a little bit already about planning in advance. If Missy and I went, she and I would have a conversation ahead of time. We would talk through the steps. We would say, who's going to do this part? Who's going to do this part? Who's going to do the ask? And then make sure that, she and I will have signals to each other. And I love teams because you can give each other a look like, ooh, this is new information. Nobody talk, because they're teaching us a lot about themselves. Or, wow, this is going terrible. I'm going to tell a story. This has happened before. Let me tell you a great story about C's that's really emotional and maybe would pull on the donor's heartstrings that day, so they would stop and think a little bit more about potentially making a gift. Sometimes a bad visit just happens and they may call later and be like, I'm so sorry. I just got bad news before you walked in. I would love to have another conversation with you and Missy next week. Or sometimes it's just like, hey, it was a bad day. No big deal. We're still going to do the ask, even if we have to get back to them. It's all about people and it's all about relationships. But I do believe sticking to what your plan is really important, and also being really respectful of the donor's time. I'm sure I've told you this before, but I've sat down with donors and we've had such a great conversation, and then they had to get back to work and I never had time to do the ask. And so make sure that that doesn't happen as well. All right, so objections. This is a very short list of objections. I have about 20. I just shortened it for today's conversation, because a lot of these you can use a lot of situations. So if someone says, we give to other charities, C's really isn't built into our plan. That teaches, and I always say, oh my gosh, what charities do you give to? If they're like, oh, it's my, Notre Dame, and it's, the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Institute, and it's Nolan High School. Oh, well, I just learned a lot about that donor. And I maybe even want to look up those institutions' annual reports to see how much they gave to those institutions. I always say that's great. I would never, ever ask you not to give. Those are all fantastic organizations. I'm just hoping that, you would consider a gift to C's, and this is why. If they say it's not a good time, no problem. Especially now, it's probably not going to be a good time for some people. Other people are really, really wanting to do something and make a difference. And so it's been really fascinating looking at the research to see the number of new donors to organizations in the past 6 months, because people are like, I didn't lose my job. I didn't lose my income. I want to make a difference. I feel guilty. I just want to have a purpose. Here's a gift. So if you hear that, I always say, you know what, I'll check back with you in 3 months. It's not a problem. People's financial situations change all the time. If someone says, how about $100 when Missy and I were going to ask them for $5? I put this as a suggestion. It depends on how aggressive I'm feeling that day. If I say, oh my gosh, thank you so much, we'll get back with you in 6 months. If I'm like, okay, I'm not asking you to do this, but I've done this before, I would say, that's amazing. We would love that gift. We were actually here to ask you for $5,000 today because we have such a huge need. And sometimes you end up making the ask right then, and sometimes it goes well, and sometimes they're like, I'm really flattered, Jill, that you thought I would make a gift that big, or I even could, but honestly, today I can only make a gift of 100. No problem, absolutely not a problem. Just know that there's a huge need, and sometimes they'll end up sending a bigger gift later. Some people ask about recognition. I typically don't respond to that question on the spot unless I've had multiple meetings with them and I already know what they're going to do. typically I'd say, sure, what are you guys interested in looking for? Do you want your logo somewhere? Do you want your business name somewhere? That really tells you kind of the value and the level of what they're planning on doing and what they're looking for. And if Missy's not in that meeting, circle back with her right away and let her know what they said. Some people say, and sometimes this is stalling, but sometimes this is really true, I need to talk to my attorney, my spouse, my family, my kids, whatever that is. And so I always say, absolutely, what questions do you think they have? I want to be prepared. And do you think we can sit down next week or even have a phone call next week to answer any of their questions? And this is the last one, which we've already talked about. If they're absolutely not interested, who else do you know would be really excited to support a C's education? So any questions on the objections? No, okay. I am going to attempt to put everybody in Zoom rooms, breakout rooms that you can't break out of. I'm going to stop sharing so here's the trick that I'm not sure, and I forgot to ask you this, Missy. When I put people in breakout rooms, are they still going to be able to see my screen so they can see the steps?
I do not know because I have never done breakout rooms before.
Okay. So if everybody wants to take like 2 seconds to jot down the talking points real quick, and then I'm going to put you in a breakout room with someone, and I just assigned them randomly, and that person, you're just going to role play back and forth. Or yeah, Chris, take a picture of the screen. Perfect. You guys are brilliant. Yes, Dr. Delgado.
What about, you're going through this, I'm thinking of scripts, kind of having something, memorizing a script before we go forward, at least in my mind.
Sure.
Then using that, are you going to have this presentation? Missy, you said you're going to have this, you're going to save this?
Recording it, and I'm going to email it to everybody on the development committee after this.
Oh, okay, great. So we'll have this for reference. Okay.
Right. So
Yes.
then you can build your own notes and your own talking points. I've written scripts for people before, but they always say they end up tripping over the words because it's my words, not their words. And I sometimes use a lot of development speak. And so I want people to use their own language. And so if you follow this, you can fill it in. And depending on who you're meeting with, sometimes you do want it a little more scripted and other times less scripted.
If we put something together, is it okay if we run it by you?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Maybe you can make suggestions. Yeah, include this. Maybe not include that, or you might want to think about this.
Right.
Just so we're as thorough as possible before we go out there and
Right.
start meeting with people.
Sure. So here's the next screen. If anybody wants to take a picture of this one, and then I'll do the final screen, the objections. All right, and then here's the objections. Okay.
Can you go back to that first one just real quick?
Yep. This one.
Jacksons are your friend.
What's that, Chris?
Just quoting the book again.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can put you into your breakout rooms. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes in your breakout rooms. Take turns practicing. Take turns throwing a crazy lunker at the other one. And then talk and then debrief. Like I said, I'll give you about 5 minutes. And then debrief. I'm hoping that'll last 5 minutes. Kind of what went well and what you thought didn't well, and then you can even practice it again. All right, let's see. Okay. And, do you have to join?
Yes. So we all click join now.
It's quick.
How people feel about
About 5 minutes.
and Therese is like, hey, I don't care. and it's really interesting. And so, to tailor it, I think that that's a great discussion to have, because Therese and I are two totally different people. And it's really interesting, and to hear how she would handle asking or opening the conversation versus me opening the conversation. And so
I think that's a good, That's a good, my timer's going off. That's a good debrief, Chad. So Chad,
But she had a duck.
I did. So Chad and Therese came back like, wow, that was really interesting. We had such a good conversation. So I found when I coached college students on asking, my phone-a-thon callers at the women's college where I worked for 5 years, my theater majors were the best askers because they were shameless. They were kind and empathetic, but they also didn't care if the person liked them or not. And I learned a lot from them, actually, because I do care what people think, and I probably shouldn't. And, but that's interesting. So Therese, that'll be really interesting to see when you talk to people, how they respond to that, and how you feel about, you know, the process is Chad as well. Anybody else have any debriefs?
It's a very fast 5 minutes.
It was very fast 5 minutes.
I was like, oh, they're so bored. I better bring them back.
No, unfortunately, Chris didn't get in a word.
Oh gosh.
No,
I've got to tell you that Mike is gonna make it rain. So
Excellent. I am going to do breakout rooms one more time, but I am going to switch people around just kind of randomly.
Are we going to the slide 2?
Are you gonna what?
Are we going to same topics or just with different people?
Yep. You're just practicing with different people. I think I mixed it up. I tried to shift every top person down one. Okay. I'm going to send you out. You just have to join. If you end up with the same person.
There we are.
How'd
Chris
it go?
and I couldn't stop talking.
Perez, I want that conversation to go on longer. Jill, make it 10 minutes for the love of God.
Do you just want to keep going? Go ahead, Michael. Keep going.
No, we were having a really good conversation around kind of the outline on how you build that funnel to bring somebody to that point. I don't know where Therese was going in what she was sharing with me at that point. I have an idea where she was going, but it was great, and I loved it.
It was all about jerk surgeons trying to get them to do what you want them to do. It's not very easy.
I can't imagine that would be easy.
I like most of the surgeons I know, so I don't know.
That's because they keep putting you back together. You're Humpty Dumpty.
That's true. That's true. Man, if you guys could meet my cardiothoracic surgeon, good old Joey Thunder is a good guy. That's all I can
Wow,
say.
nice. Okay, any other debriefs? How did it go the second time? Did you feel a little bit better? Did you feel more confident? Yeah.
To the principal's office.
Michael went to the principal's office.
Hey, Jill, I have a question, or anybody. In this
Yeah.
electronic age, what's kind of the sequence of coordinating these conversations? Is it a text message first, and then a phone text message, and how do you dip your toe into it? When do you pick up a phone call? Call them directly, or do you call them straight? Just cold call them. Hey, look, I'd like to talk to you about Seton Catholic School. When would be a good time to do that?
I pick up the phone. I don't know, Missy, what do you do?
I think it really depends on my relationship with the person, how well I know them. I do like the phone call too, although sometimes I'm a chicken and I start with an email and then follow up with a phone call, to be honest.
So I'll share with you, Mark, in my experience, I usually start with a phone call. I'll leave a voice message. If I don't get a call back the next day, I'll send them a text and say, hey, just checking in. Did you get my voice message? I'd really love to visit with you sometime soon. And if they don't respond to that, you can call them again and just keep calling until they get there. But, that sometimes can be a dissatisfier. But I think if you go about it that way, they're going to acknowledge you at some point.
Yeah, so your initial phone call or text says, hey, look, I'd like to talk to you about Seton Catholic School. When would be, so I'll give you a holler tomorrow at whatever.
Yeah. If it's somebody that I don't know, I'm not going to lead with a text. I'll lead with a phone call. If it's somebody that I do know, I might feel a little more comfortable talking to them via text. But that phone call and actually having the opportunity to engage with them person to person really is the jumping off point to being able to build that personal connection.
Yeah, I guess the quandary is, okay, if they pick up the phone, then all of a sudden you just kind of hit them out of the blue. Hey, I'm going to talk to you about C's right now, right? Or say, hey, look, can I just I wanted to see if I can schedule some time with you, in 3 days, whatever.
Yeah,
And you could do like, hey, Kristen and I are so excited about this project at our kids' school. We really would love to get together with you and tell you more about it and why we're excited about it, and see if you might like to be a part of it. That might be an approach, rather than, hey, I want to talk to you about C School. You know, sharing what it is you're excited about it is a good lead in.
I think you could also say, hey, I'd like to spend some time visiting with you about your thoughts around the future of the Catholic Church, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing, is we're doing everything we can to promulgate the future of the Catholic Church. And anybody who's Catholic that has that concern is going to say, yeah, I'd be happy to share my thoughts with you on that topic. And then you can basically create a funnel to put them in the direction of supporting the school.
Jill, the book had mentioned working in teams. Is that something you recommend, or is that too comparing to the individual?
No, I've worked in triplets before fairly often. Sometimes it's a client that has 2 staff members and I. Sometimes it's me with 2 committee volunteers. So no, I think you have to be careful if you bring 3 that there's more than one of them. So like when I've come in 3s, there's at least 2 of the others, if not 3 of them. Otherwise, if there's 2, like Missy and Jen visited with me about the playground, like Missy and I could go visit with, 1 person or a couple. I like teams because one person can be taking notes or listening while the other's talking, and you learn a lot more when it's just you. One person I've solicited one-on-one many times, but I like having another person there because sometimes I might not catch something because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, or I'm taking notes and I can't read their face, when they're talking about something, if I'm writing. So it's all possible. Don't really outnumber them. I think 2 of us and 1 of them is fine. Anything more than that, I wouldn't do. If
question in regards to the playground, how are we doing on the funding on that?
I think Missy will give an update at the end, won't you, Missy?
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah. So real quick. So just to that point, a little bit of a time check. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
And I know that we want to talk about kind of the next steps and what the next few weeks look like. So we want to leave some time for that. And so why don't we just have like maybe 1 or 2 more questions real quick, and then let's go. Can we then pivot to wrapping it up and setting the stage for the next few weeks?
Perfect. Anyone else? I'll say that. So then going out into, so just I'm not sharing my screen. So I'm showing you, I'm talking about a screen you can't see here. So final notes, just follow the process. Even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable to go through those steps, just try it a few times and see how it goes. If there's some step that you feel like you're getting, I'm not even sharing it. If there's some steps you feel like you're kind of getting stuck on, you could reach out to me or Missy and, have a conversation. Practice with your spouse, practice with your kids, practice with yourself. Just keep saying the language and it'll come a lot easier. One thing is, don't project your values of money onto someone else. The amount you're asking for may be a lot to you or may be really inconsequential, but it's about the ask to the donor and what we believe they're capable of investing in the school. And so the research piece, the next point, that would be, Missy will have already done the research to say like, oh, they have a pretty high wealth screening, or, hey, we found that they made a, $5,000 gift to Nolan or whatever that is, or Notre Dame. So this is what we think would be appropriate for the ask to them, today. And so then you can be confident in the ask because there's at least, it's based on a little bit of research, or even these are the last 3 gifts to seize. Missy can easily see that as well.
And you also don't know how they're going to prioritize their money. If they really believe in it, they may end up cutting out something, right? To do something,
right. Absolutely. And sometimes it's expendable income. You don't know how much they spend going out to dinner, obviously not during the pandemic, or buying clothes or going on vacation. And so some of that stuff they may step back from. Some of that may be like, oh, it's expendable income to us. But be really straightforward. So don't tell them you're going to talk about one thing, but then really talk to them about something else. I know some organizations do that and have a history of doing that. And donors don't respond well to that when you're asking for their investment if they think they're meeting with you for a different reason. When you say, I want to talk to you about a program at Seas, I think that's perfectly acceptable to say, you know, these are all the programs. Missy's coming with me. She wants to give you an update. And then you can even say, we have a great need, you know, for tuition assistance. I would love to hear your questions. And then that wouldn't be a right time to ask for a gift, because that's really the first time they're hearing about it even. And just keep in mind, people always become before money. If people feel like they're being treated like an ATM, they may give you a little bit of money to make you go away, and you won't really get a genuine gift, and you won't build a long-term relationship. You know, this is about building a long-term relationship and trust. This isn't about getting one gift and going away. This is about building that relationship. So then over time, growing their investment in Seas would really be the goal over time.
So you don't think you should do the ask at the first visit?
It depends on who it is. If it's a current parent and they're already making gifts to other things at the school, I think it's perfectly appropriate, because they've probably already heard of tuition assistance and all those things. If it's a family that maybe no longer has kids at Seas, or it's a parishioner that doesn't have kids at Seas, then if I don't know them very well, or Missy doesn't know them very well, it may not be appropriate. But still be prepared of how much you're gonna ask them for, just in case they say, you know what, go ahead and ask me today, and I'll think about it and I'll get back to you. So I would have the conversation with Missy or whoever that other person is in advance, so you have a plan of if it seems appropriate to ask that person, so you feel prepared for it.
Last question here, guys, and then we'll start thinking about next meeting next week.
I don't have anything else. So Missy, do you want to talk about next steps? I can stop sharing.
Next steps would be that we work on, by next meeting, I should try to get lists of people that we already know are in our funnel through Bloomerang, and we can look at the names and see if you have connections with anyone, and then be able to make appointments to talk to them about the need, and we can decide what we need to ask for and how much and that type of thing.
So that would be the August meeting that we would go through the lists.
If we have leads, potential leads, is that something we can email those to you, or?
Yes, please.
Okay.
That would be fabulous. If you already have people in mind, that would be great that you want to talk to. But then we do also have our list in Bloomerang too.
Perfect. So then by the September meeting, everybody could report back who they'd connected with, thinking 30, 60 days. Okay.
So the only, Missy's, I mean, the only homework that we have right now is if we have leads that we need to put your way, and then practice. And that's
Yes.
what we need to be doing between now and our next meeting, which is
Yes.
coming up in probably, what, 3 weeks time?
Yes. Yes. Sounds perfect.
I shall send a few your way.
Okay. Excellent.